Okay. So I think we can start, okay? So this should be, this is the course of web application, okay? I hope to be in the right room, okay? And my name is Enrico Masala, the name you see here, okay? I'm recording the lecture, and I will record all the lectures as I already brought to you by email, and there is a news in the Politecnico web portal in the page of this course. Okay, so you already find the material online. You should have got this email, and there is a Telegram group and so on. Okay, so we will review all these things in this first lecture. Okay. And then in the second part of today, we will start with the topics of the course. Okay? Okay, so let's start from the basics. Okay, so first of all, welcome to this course. And this course is about understanding web architectures. Okay? Let's say mastering web application design and development. So we will try to do something, I would say, relatively simple, okay, assuming you have almost no knowledge of these things, okay? So I'm sorry for those of you who already know a lot of things, but this is supposed to be a course, a quite basic course about web applications, okay? Why? Because web applications are very important nowadays. We interact with web applications every day, okay? And so to do this, we will try to get some knowledge, and I would say very good knowledge of the JavaScript language. Okay, we will go into many details about JavaScript. And also, since building everything from scratch, so just with the basic support of the language is very difficult, we will use a framework, okay? And for this course, since already a number of years, we chose React, which is still very widely used around, so that should be a good choice, okay? Of course, we are in the cybersecurity course of study. You should be all enrolled in this course, okay, course of study, and so we will give some particular attention to the security aspects in web applications whenever it's needed, okay? Actually, on basic security aspects, because you have a whole course of study that is discussing all these things, so we will not go into too many details or too much in depth in these things, okay? But just not to make the very big mistakes in security, when we are talking about web applications. Of course, there is an official course description. I hope you read it, okay? So, this is the official course description. It's very cryptic somewhere, and but we will basically review all these aspects today, now, in this lecture, okay? Okay. So you are in the cybersecurity course of study. There are a lot of other courses in this course of study that discuss security. Okay, this is just well, not a few, but most of them, I think. Okay, and depending on the path you chose, you might have some of them or not. Okay, so I'm telling this to you because we already have feedback from your colleagues from past years, and which is always a good thing from the teacher's point of view. And the feedback comes from the CPD in Italian, or JCT, that's the official translation for English, Joint Committee on Teaching. That means the questionnaire that you fill up at the end of the courses, okay, giving feedback to the teachers. Well, actually, one of the biggest criticism was about the need for better connection to cybersecurity topics for the past 2 years, I would say. Okay, and this is probably stemming from a misunderstanding of the fact that this is supposed to be a quite basic course about web application, because we really need to know very well how web application works. Okay? And as I told you, there are many other courses that will go into much more depth in security, cyber security aspects. Okay? We will pay attention whenever it's needed, but that's the purpose, the main purpose of this course. Okay? We are here in terms of satisfaction rate. That's the Italian web, the portal that I can see from the teacher's point of view, just in Italian, but anyway. So it should be a good course in general, okay? And also, I mean, from the feedback of past years, typically students like it. So, I mean, there should be no big concern in this sense, okay? So, going into more details about what we are going to discuss in this course. As I already told you, the JavaScript as a language. Of course, you already know how to program, okay? Even AI and so on, we talk about that, knows how to program more or less, okay? But here, we are focusing, of course, not on the basic control structure and so on, you already know all these things, but on the peculiarity of the language, of the JavaScript language, because there are a lot of things that we can learn, how to really exploit JavaScript as a language to build our applications, web application, and not only web application, also the server side and so on, okay? We will discuss briefly about what is available in the browser ecosystem. The browser is that program that you use to surf the web, okay? So to use the web applications. And of course, we need to know how it works internally, especially. And then we will build, let's say, for more or less half of the course, maybe a little bit more, a web application, okay? Using an approach that is a modern approach, the approach called the single page application. So basically, you load the information from the server the first time you access the website, and then everything happens on the client side, because we can program the behavior on the client side through the JavaScript programming language, okay? And as I told you before, we will not start from scratch. I mean, just in the beginning, maybe just to do a few experiments, but then we will rely on a framework because it helps us a lot to build more complex application with less effort. Okay, so that's more or less the calendar. It's not really mapped one-to-one to the weeks, okay? Just the topics. Okay. By the way, if you're curious, I mean, the material also for past courses and so on is still online. We don't delete anything. So if you're just curious, more or less the structure of the course in this year is almost the same as last year. Of course, every year we try to improve, and something that could have been done better last year, hopefully will be better this year. Okay. But more or less that's the structure. This is how the course is organized. So today, Monday, we are here in room R3 from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Okay, so we have, let's say, 2 slots of one hour and a half. We have other 2 slots on Thursday morning, early morning, 8:30 a.m. Okay, and then we have laboratories, which are supposed to be in 3 groups. So we have 3 slots, the green ones, on Tuesday and Thursday. Okay? Since, I mean, we have quite a few slots, and we can, let's say, use them in a quite flexible manner. Okay? Because the slots for the lab actually are rooms with a power outlet, with the socket where you can plug in the computer. Sometimes we can rearrange the schedule a little bit to have maybe one more lab and so on during the week. So you will always find a detailed schedule week by week here. Okay? That's the same link you already got by email. Okay? That's the main page. Oops, the main page. Make it a bit bigger. Okay, that's the main page of the course for this year. If you put 2025, you go to last year and so on. Anyway, first link is detailed schedule. So exactly what I was showing to you before. I mean, this week is already filled up. Okay, so, and we will try to do this at least 1 week in advance. Sometimes maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, when there are holidays, Easter holidays, and so on. Okay, so to give you a planning. Okay, and you find the material for the lectures and also for the labs linked from here. Okay, so for instance, these slides are already here. Okay, the ones I'm showing to you. Okay, so you can see that this week there is no lab activity, okay, as it usually happens with all courses that have labs, okay, because we need to discuss something, some topics in the lectures before you can start working a little bit in the lab, okay, but from next week, so no, it's not 30th of February, but in March, okay, 2nd of March, I think. Well, actually 3rd, because it's Tuesday, we will start labs, okay? Okay, so basically this week there's today and Thursday, and that's all for this week. Okay, so always remember to check the calendar to know what's going to happen. Okay, classes are here in person. In the rooms, we should have R3, so this room both for today and Thursday. You should have some power outlets, so if you want to bring in the laptop, as somebody of you already did, it should be okay. Okay, that's the wireless network connection when you need the network. Okay, this is not strictly necessary, but sometimes we'll try to program a little bit, write some code and test code and so on. So if you want to experiment by yourself or try a different solution, something different and so on, if you have a laptop, it's easier. Okay? We will record, actually, I will record the lectures, and I will publish them as soon as possible when the lecture finishes. Okay, so today's lecture will be published, I guess, today after the lecture. Depending on my schedule, but more or less, I try to be on time. Okay, so before the evening, it should be online. Okay, we are not streaming it because it's more complex, it's more prone to errors, issues, and so on. So. That's a decision we already took in past years. It worked well, and so I don't see any need to change it. Okay, so in case you see that it's not recording, just tell me, please. Okay, and let's avoid problems in this sense. I will publish the lectures on YouTube. Okay, and also on the website, on the course website, so you can also easily download it in case you need it. Okay, because YouTube is nice to watch, but it's a bit tricky to download it. Okay, we try to make live example, live coding whenever possible, and so on. Laboratories start March the 3rd. Okay. And we will be in rooms, not in labs. Okay, we call them labs, but actually you need to bring your own laptop or work with somebody who has a computer, a laptop with him or herself. Okay. We will publish the text in advance, so you know what you are going to do during the lab, and you are also welcome to try doing something before the lab. So we use the time in the lab in the most effective way. Okay, I will be present in the lab, or my colleague Antonio, the one you saw on the first slide, the name you saw here on the first slide, will be in the lab together with one student. Okay, we have 3 students for this course, but one at a time will be in the lab that already attended this course in past years, and it can help us in giving advice, suggestions, and so on. Okay, We will publish the solutions for the labs, also because I believe that it's important to know how things should have been done, because otherwise just exercise and you don't know the solution. And so, okay, at the beginning I don't like to publish the text with the solution because you need to try. But then, just after a few days, we will publish the solutions for the lab. Actually, it's just a possible solution, okay? As in any programming course, it's just a possible solution. You are welcome to try to develop a different solution, especially come to the lab and ask, if you don't realize it yourself, what's the advantage or disadvantage of doing one thing in a way or another or in another, okay? But at least we give some guidance, and having the solution for the labs also helps you for the next lab. So in case you miss one lab, I know it's not, so convenient taking the code from somebody else, but at least you don't have to start from scratch. Okay, so if you want to keep the pace with the next labs, you can do it, because you can start from our solutions. Okay, and if the topic is not really strictly connected, or it's like a precedence before what we are going to do, you can keep the pace and then maybe recover later the lab you missed. Okay, so let's come to the labs. The labs are organized in this way. You will build a simple project, relatively simple project, from start to end, basically. Okay? Of course, step by step, we will build both the server and the client part of the web application, a sample web application, except maybe for the first couple of labs where we familiarize with the environment, we try to work a little bit with JavaScript and so on. But then we will start doing something useful for developing a web application, okay? Which is basically the aim of the course, one of the aims of the course, and also what is required for the exam, okay? We will discuss about the exam in a minute. We have 3 slots for the labs, so actually I have to divide you in 3 groups, and the simplest way is to take the last name and split them in more or less equal group sizes, okay? But I must tell you, this is not really strictly enforced, so you have your friend, you want to work with somebody, maybe you have a problem for one slot because, you're busy for something else and you want to come in another slot and so on. This is possible. We don't check neither the presence nor who you are in the lab and so on, as long as, the attendance is not too high, okay? Because the rooms have a maximum size and cannot accommodate all of you in just one group, okay? So this is just to give you an advice on where to start, okay? And then, as you see how the schedule fits, how our schedule fits your schedule, you can also change the groups and so on, okay? I must tell you, yes, that actually attendance last year and the year before in this course was not that high in the labs, except maybe for the first 2-3, okay? So we will see how things develop, and in case we will adjust these groups and also the schedule. Adjusting the schedule means that what happened last year, for instance, is that since the attendance was low, actually we dropped one slot. Okay, so we released one slot. By the way, it's very welcome from the Politecnico because they have a shortage of rooms. Okay, but if there are just, let's say, 4 or 5 persons in a group, it doesn't make sense to keep the group. Okay. Okay, good. So, learning material. So, what's available for you to study and to learn something in this course? Well, everything is made public. Actually, public in this course means available to everybody, even outside this university. Okay, it's just on GitHub. everything is publicly accessible, lectures included, because I put them on YouTube. You can find the last year's lectures on YouTube as well, okay? So no need to ask for password access or whatever, okay? This should be the link for this year's lectures. Of course, now there's a playlist which is empty, okay, but it will soon be populated by the lectures, okay? You will find the example, the solution, what we're developing during the lectures and so on, everything on the GitHub, okay? Because when I finish writing code, I commit it on the GitHub, and so it becomes available to everybody. We don't do anything really special, secret, and so on, so, I mean, we can publish it to anybody, and that's fine. Okay, you already got the email and also the message on the Didactica web portal. We will try to use Telegram. It worked quite well in the past editions of this course for the communication about the course, okay? I must tell you it's not so used, okay, by you students to pose questions. I don't really know why. Maybe, I mean, since it's read by everybody, maybe you're shy, or I don't know. Okay, maybe you prefer ask questions in the lab because you have the code in front of you, it's easier to comment and so on. But if you have questions, feel free to write on the Telegram, and I will monitor it, maybe not really Saturday, Sunday and night, okay? But, you know, other times I'll try to answer as soon as possible. It's also useful for you, okay? So I don't mind if somebody else answers a question made by others, okay? It's a really nice way of using this Telegram channel. And in case there are answers which are not correct, I will reply to the answer with, you know, with some advice, okay? Of course, it cannot be really used for the exam, okay? So you cannot really write how to solve this part of the exam and so on. I will delete the message. I will some way block this behavior, okay? But I mean, for the rest, it's fine. This is the link, which is also in the message. You can subscribe. You can use to subscribe to the channel. You can forward it to any students also is not enrolled for some reason. I mean, we don't really care. You can use a nickname. Any nickname is fine. Just remember when you write to me by direct message, I just say the nickname, so I don't know who you are. So if I need to look up something for you specifically, I need to know who you are. So just remember to write who you are. But I mean, for general questions, I don't mind. Emails can still be used if you have some issues, programs, and more complex questions and so on. Feel free to write an email, no problem. I mean, my email is like any other teacher in the Politecnico, first name dot last name @polito.it. Okay, very easy. Okay, so let's come to the very important topic of this lecture, which is the exam. Okay? Okay, first of all, this is replicated on many different slides. Okay, that's from the experience of past years. The oral discussion that we will talk about in a minute will not be on the day of the exam. You see on the Politecnico web portal there will be dates for exam in end of June more or less, July, September, and typically January. They are not published yet, we don't know them yet. I don't know either. But this is just the official date that the Politecnico decided to assign to our course, because you know these dates are decided centrally, so that you don't have 3 exams for 3 different courses on the same day. There is some space, hopefully, from between the exam of one course to another and so on. So we'll use this date just as a reference and typically as the deadline for submitting the required project for the exam. Okay? And so what is the exam? The exam consists in individual project development plus an oral discussion. Okay? So what is this project development or assignment? Well, actually, not surprisingly, is to develop a web application. Okay? But actually not as you like, because there are many different ways of developing web application, but according to the given functional specification using the approach and technologies seen during this course. Okay? So it means it must use React, it must use JavaScript, of course. Well, without JavaScript it's a bit difficult to develop something in web. But the backend part should use Node. Of course, maybe you don't know what Node is. We will talk about this later in the course. Express, that's the framework that helps to develop web servers. SQLite as a database, and so on. Okay? So we will see all these technologies during the course, and we expect you to use these technologies for the project you submit as part of your exam. Okay? We will not accept solutions using different technologies, approaches, and so on. Okay? We know, I mean, there are different technologies, approaches, and ways of developing web applications. Okay? But in this course, you're supposed to show knowledge of the technologies that we discuss. Okay? There are two reasons for this. One, we don't know everything. Okay? So if you stick to these technologies, we can really evaluate you, I hope, in a very careful way. And the second one is that we need to test your application. So if one uses one software, another uses a second software, another one uses a different database, and so on, it becomes really difficult to test the application. So if we standardize the way in which the application is developed, also the exam is much faster for us and for you as well, okay? Because an individual project means that everybody of you has to come at a certain date to discuss this project, okay? It takes 20 minutes minimum, I guess, from past experience to discuss the project. So if you count how many of you are in this room, okay? It takes a lot of time. Okay, so the less time we spend in doing trivial things like setting up the projects and so on, the better. Okay, just to give you a number, there are 180, more or less, students enrolled first time this year. Okay, so that's the number, 180. Okay, another thing I want to tell you about the exam. It's not just developing a web application, okay? But the exam is about to being able to explain what you did and why, okay? So the reason for your implementation choices, you decided to do one thing in a certain way with a certain function using a certain React capability and so on. Why? What were the possible alternatives? What is the trade-off? Do we store this information in the database or not? How do we store it, and so on? Okay, all these things. And why? Why we focus on this part and not just about developing web application? Well, you know, I mean, AI is progressing a lot. Okay, we are all using it, me included. Okay. And if you take the exam, you put into ChatGPT, whatever, what is the Copilot and so on, it's almost solved. Okay, you can take the past exams. Okay, and so we don't want to evaluate an AI. Okay, and we won't actually. I mean, that's the least important thing. Actually, we want to create engineers like you that are able to understand what's going on and what could be the problems, what could be the alternatives, and they are actually able to evaluate maybe in the future what an AI has produced. Okay? Is it good? Is it bad? Are there problems? And so on. Okay? So that's why we will focus, especially starting from this year, on this second part, okay? Being able to explain the reason of the implementation choices, trade-off, alternatives, and so on, okay? That's the part on which we create the grade, okay? Because the rest can be done almost automatically, I would say, okay, nowadays. The assignment, so what you should do in terms of web application will be published about 20 days, means more or less 3 weeks, before each official exam date, okay? That will be the deadline, this T0, okay? So you have 3 weeks to develop your web application, okay? Before each exam date, like the one in end of June, and the one in July, one in September, and so on, okay? The assignment is different for each exam date, okay? There's a deadline, and then after the deadline, who submitted the project is, let's say, invited to discuss the project, okay? And of course, when we start discussing the project, you cannot just submit another project on the same topic, because then you learn from what we discuss with your colleagues, okay? Okay, this is really, really important. This is new for this year. I modified a little bit the slides for this introductory lecture for this year, because we are seeing more and more problems of this type, okay? The project is an individual project, so you are supposed to develop it yourself, okay? Even if the project is perfect, it means you can run it and do all the operations that are supposed to be done in the text, like it's I don't know, it's a shop site, and you can click and put into a cart, buy, and do all the operations that are expected from the text. Regardless of that, okay, if we discover that you don't know what you did, or you did it with the help of somebody else because it's very similar and so on, you will fail the exam, okay? Of course, according to the Politecnico regulation, as in any other Italian university, you can come at the next, say, appello in Italian, so exam date, the next exam date, and submit another project, okay? That's a rule and for these universities, and so this it doesn't affect your right to come to a next date, okay? But you lose time, we lose time, and so on, so we don't like it, of course. But I must tell you, I mean, cheating in terms of not following these rules, it means doing the project individually, understanding what you are doing or what you did. This cheating will not be tolerated in any form, okay? Of course, you're not supposed to copy or from others. You're not supposed to develop the project for others. This is submit the project for others. I mean, this is quite, unusual, okay? And then using AI tools, let's say it's tolerated, and we will discuss a little bit more in a minute. But if you use these tools, you will need to be able to explain the code generated by these tools in detail, okay? This is a warning also on the basis of past years. Well, of course, I mean, if you're not able to explain the code, of course you fail the exam, that's all. But of course, if you submit the project for somebody else, you come at the exam and you claim to be another person and so on, of course this stuff can have several high impact consequences, okay? And unfortunately, if you go to the link here, I mean, this is just a generic web page of the Politecnico, not just for this course. You see that the number of cases are quite increasing, okay, recently. So please don't be, I would say, avoid being in a situation like this, okay? Because it creates a lot of consequences, negative consequences. Okay? Okay, just to be very clear, I created this slide, which is the timeline on how the exam develops. So at the beginning, we will publish a text of what has to be submitted for a certain exam date. Okay, so that's a text of the specifications. Develop a web application that can do, I don't know, like an e-commerce website or booking for places for a theater and so on. Okay, things like this. And then we will leave more or less 1 week, okay, where you can read the text, try to understand any part of the text. You will come up with questions. It's absolutely normal. It's like somebody come to you and give you, ask you to develop a web application. And there's a certain idea in mind, and it explains it to you in words, okay, just speaking, and we write it, of course, and then you come up with questions, because who is asking to develop this application doesn't know all the details, and maybe didn't think of all the cases that can happen in the application and so on. And so you will come up with questions, and you can ask questions to the one that requires the development of the application. In this course, it's the teachers, okay? And we will try to address the most frequent questions in a revised version of the text. Okay? This especially applies to the first 2 exam dates, where there are a lot of students coming in, and of course a lot of questions comes out. Okay? Because the more you read the text, the more doubts you might have. Okay? We will try to have something which is not so ambiguous, okay? Also on the basis of the experience of past years, but it's not so easy, okay? And then after this week, there will be still 2 more weeks, more or less, in which you develop your project. So it means you develop your application, and at the end you submit the result of what you developed. Okay? You can submit it multiple times. I mean, we don't really care. Just you need to do it before the deadline. Okay? Okay. So the evening before T0, that means the day of the exam, there will be the submission deadline. Okay? Like the exam is, 28th of June, sorry. And the deadline is typically the 27th, okay, end of the day, more or less. I mean, we already did midnight. I mean, if you prefer before, we can do it before, but I mean, it's not really important, okay? And then we will typically spend the T0, that is the exam date, to check the submission and create the oral schedule, and then we publish it. Okay? Because especially in exams where there are a lot of submissions, just to give you a number, last year, first exam date, so first appello, there were like 100 students. Okay? So it takes a lot of time to check everything and to create a schedule. Okay? I will tell you what are the checks that we are going to do and the operation we are going to do. And so that is why the oral discussion is not on this day, okay? It's in the following days, okay? And so 1 or more days after the T0, so this day of the exam, there will be the oral discussion of the project, and we will make a schedule, because especially at the first exam dates, it will take more than 1 day, okay? I think last year, maybe 3 days for the first exam date. Me and my colleague Antonio, okay? So not just me alone, otherwise it would take double the time, okay? So if there are just a few, you like 10 people, just half a day we solve it. 20 people probably 1 day isn't enough. More than 20 people it takes more than 1 day. Okay, and then we will record the grades at the end. Okay, of course. So what are we going to do after the project submission? Well, first we have a tool that does similarity check, okay, because we don't want to have two very, very similar solutions submitted from two different students. It's an individual project, so we expect there is some variability between one project and the other, okay? There shouldn't be a problem if you develop it yourself, okay? Because there's a lot of fantasy, there's a lot of different ways in which you can develop the solution, okay? It actually never happened that two different students submitted the same project, except if they copied it, okay? Maybe changing a little bit, some comments, some variable names, and so on, okay? It happened, unfortunately, for 2-3 students, I think 2 years ago. But, I mean, it was really evident it wasn't just a copy, okay? Of course, there will be similar solutions, okay? Because we provide some code, we provide examples and so on. And so in those parts, we expect similarities, no problem. But in the part for the project, we expect something that is not really equal for each one of you. There was a question, right?
Yes. If our submission is before the deadline, can we edit our file?
Yes, if the submission is before the deadline, you can change your files. Actually, the submission system is not yet published, okay? You can have a look at the previous year just in case you are curious, but we will publish it in May, I think. Basically, it's just committing the project on GitHub, okay? So you can do a second commit or third commit and so on, and you can update as long as you wish until the deadline, okay? We have a system to connect your names to the your real names to the GitHub username, and that's all. Okay. The submissions are not public, of course. Okay, it's a private repository that we will create. I think in May, more or less, before the first exam date. Okay, so you can submit multiple times. Let's say. Okay, and in this first day. This day of the exam, we will create a schedule for the oral discussion, okay? And unfortunately, the actual day of the oral discussion for a given student is not known until then, okay? So I cannot tell you if it's the first day, second day, third day. Maybe just before the exam date, as long as we have a reasonable estimate of the number of students who are going to submit, we will have to book some rooms. So we have an idea more or less about the days in which we will have the oral discussion, okay? But not really the actual schedule, because we need to wait for you to submit the project and check the project submission is valid, is not equal to somebody else, and so on, okay? Okay, so just be careful, because somebody of you maybe say, okay, I'm going, the exam is 28th of June, and then I book the train on the 29th. No, it doesn't work this way, okay? You need to wait a little bit more, okay? If unsure, ask the teacher, it means me, typically in advance, okay? As long as we know something, we will tell you, okay? All discussion will have to be in presence, okay? So no remote exams. It's forbidden by the university regulations, I think, even from the Ministry of Education, but already since some years, okay? So you have to come here in some rooms. We will book some room for doing these discussions, okay? Another thing I will do after your submission is take your code and load it into a Linux server and client part, both, okay? And this ensures that we test what has been submitted. Okay, you're in the cybersecurity course of study. We don't want to be fooled by you. Okay, this is what I submitted. Here it is. I mean, we need to check and ensure that after you submit something, we take exactly that code and we test exactly that code. But I mean, we could even trust it, but I mean, the important thing of this step is that if we set up everything by ourselves, the testing is much faster, okay? Because everything is already ready to be tested, prepared, and we just need to switch the student name and everything is there, okay? Since you are like 100 at the first exam date, it takes a lot of time, okay? And the less time we spend on trivial things, the better. Okay. There will be submission instructions, very detailed submission instructions. It means we provide a skeleton of the project, so you just need to add your files there and so on. Just check carefully all these things that we will discuss later in the course, like install, imports, ports, and so on. Okay? Because of course, I mean, we can always try to make your project work, but it means, well, first of all, it costs you some points on the final grade, and it costs time, okay, which is maybe even more precious. Okay, there is already a section exam on the website, so just check it in case you want to know. I mean, you should know. Okay, second link is exam. There is a lot of instruction, rules, and so on. That's basically what we are discussing. Okay, so just have a read on this. Okay, and in case you have questions next time or in next lectures, we can discuss it. Okay. Okay. Oral discussion. So you developed the project, you submitted the project, you got the schedule, you got an appointment, and you come and discuss the project. Okay? Very, 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 very important. Not being able to explain your code, okay, immediately leads to exam failure, because we have no other way of checking that you did it yourself other than that you explain what you did in your code, okay? Because you do it at home, okay? We cannot just close you in a room for 3 weeks, right? You do it at home, and of course you can interact with people, with the internet and so on. But I mean, this is sort of normal for project developers and code developers and so on. It was normal, it's still normal that you interact with people and you take inspiration from things you find around and so on. The important thing is that you know what you do and you're able to explain what you did. Okay? Maybe it's wrong, maybe you didn't reason it correctly and so on, but at least you know what you are trying to do. Okay? I don't want to say what you're doing, what you are trying to do. Okay? Note that if we discover something like this, we are not going to test the app. Okay? Unfortunately, it already happened quite a few times last year, especially now that AI is becoming more and more powerful. Okay? Indeed, the most common reason for that cause exam failure is the fact that the student cannot explain something that is included in the code, like functions, library functions that we didn't explain during the lectures and so on. We don't really care where this help came from. Okay? Can be AI tools, can be the internet, can be friends, can be whatever you want. But, I mean, the point of this course is being able to explain what you did and explain how your project works. Okay? And note that anything not seen during the lectures is suspect by default. Okay? I tell you this because there are a lot of ways in which you can solve the project. Okay, we are using a framework, React, that has a lot of functions, a lot of APIs, a lot of characteristics that we are not going to cover in the course. Okay, because we don't have enough time. Okay, just 8 credit course. And also, it's not needed to develop a basic web application, and we are interested in understanding the concept behind the web application and not in all the details, all the optimizations and so on coming from this framework. Okay? So, there are a lot of cases in which students come, I mean, not a lot, but I mean, a few cases, in which students come at the exam and used something that we didn't explain during the lecture, typically from React, okay? Functions made available by React. And so, I mean, really strange, right? You use something, and maybe it was a good idea, but you have, I mean, if you use it in a way that is reasonable and you are able to explain why and why you couldn't follow what we did during the classroom, but you wanted to do it in your way, that's fine, okay? But unfortunately, this is just 100% of the cases. The other 99% of the cases is, I mean, they don't say in this way, but I have no idea what this function is doing, okay? Which is not acceptable to pass the exam. There is a question, right?
Is it still possible to get a full grade even if there is suspect code that is explained later on?
Yeah, I mean, if it's explained,
it's possible to get a full grade.
It's possible to get a full grade, okay? But, I mean, the point is that that's why we suggest not to use these functions, okay? Because the code is made suspect by default. And, but, I mean, of course, we are not familiar with every single details of like React framework and so on. But if you're able to explain, we can search in the internet and so on. And you have also a good reason to use it, which typically is the most difficult part. Because, I mean, our assignments are quite simple. There's no need to optimize anything or no need to develop something in a different way. Otherwise, it means that we didn't think about the assignment very well, because we gave something that was not really possible with what we explained, which never happened in the past. In this case, I mean, using functions that has not been explained is very, very strange, right? And as I told you, it happened once that the student was able to explain this behavior, and I mean the explanation was reasonable. It was just one, okay? Okay, and explaining the suspect code means that you need to be able to tell what the code is doing, what the function is taking as a parameter, what the function is returning, why you use it. Okay, 4 things which are quite difficult to explain, and I would say to justify, because in our project typically those functions are not needed. Okay, but I mean, we understand that somebody of you maybe is using React every day, might be, okay, and might have used that function because he or she knows what she should be doing and so on. Okay? Okay, again, still on the oral discussion, okay? So the student must be able to explain the rationale. So what led you to think in this way and to implement this logic in the program, in the project? Which checks or actions are in place to make the solution secure against the most common types of attacks? Don't forget that we are in the cybersecurity course of study. We are not tolerating code that is, very insecure, I would say. So, I mean, has obvious security bugs. Okay? I mean, security bugs can be subtle, we know. you will learn it in this course of study, but I mean, there are things which are really, really easy to catch. I mean, you didn't check who is accessing the data. I mean, it's a security issue. I mean, quite an evident security issue. Okay, some data cannot be accessed or modified by certain type of users or by generic users and so on. Okay, and then third thing here. You see the warning sign. We expect you to be able to discuss at least basic variants of the solution. Okay? So let's say, okay, you implemented the form in this way. Let's suppose we add one more field with these characteristics. How would you do it? Can you change this field to get also text input or whatever? Okay, some reasonably simple questions, okay, that make us understand the fact that you are able to write some code without the help of some AI or whatever system, external system. Okay, and again, this is very, very important nowadays that we have many AI tools able to basically solve our assignment, which is quite simple. So we only have two ways to go. Either we make a very, very complicated assignment, it's something that we don't want to do, because it takes you either a lot of time or maybe you need to be proficient with these AI tools, but at this point we need to explain them and we need to tell you how to use them, and we need to give you access to them and so on. So it's very difficult path. Maybe in the future the university will move in this direction. This is not the current direction of this year course, at least. And so the only other option is you know what you did, and so since you know what you did, you are also able to do small modifications. We don't ask for a complete rewrite or something completely different from what we asked. Okay? Note that this is not a presentation of the project given by the students. So it's typically me or my colleague who is leading the discussion. So we open the project. Typically, we just check it runs first, because sometimes it doesn't run because of the issues I told you before, imports, uppercase, lowercase, all these things. Okay, so it doesn't start. Okay? Then it runs. We open a README file that you prepared. There are a specification that tells you, first thing, you need to write a README file with some description of what the project is doing. APIs, routes, we will see what they are later in the course, and so on. So the database structure. And so we have a rough idea of what's happening inside your project. And then we will start discussing the project. Okay? Provided that at T0, so in that day, the exam date, we didn't find anything suspicious. Okay? So suspicious code will have the priority. Okay? If we find something which is suspicious, we will start discussing from that suspicious code. Okay? Just to save time. Okay? Because if you know that, okay, we can continue. If you don't know that, unfortunately, the exam will be failed. Okay? So, just a couple of slides, I think, and then we finish and have a break. These are the grading, the criteria for grading. Okay? Of course, a project that takes enough points to pass, that means 18 here, okay, is different from one that takes the maximum grade, okay, 30 plus the allowed. And so what do we check in the project to determine the grade? Okay? Well, we have a look at the code in terms of programming pattern, security management and checks, okay, very important in this cybersecurity course study, data integrity checks, code clarity, uniformity, and so on. Okay? Correct usage of React patterns. We will see React. To use React, you need to arrange the code in a certain way. Okay. The API design, content of API requests and responses. I will always do this operation. I open your application with the debugger below the application. Okay? I need to understand what's going on in your application. Okay? You can do the same actually. We will do it during the course. I will check what's the information exchange between the server and the client. Okay? It can be easily done with any modern browser. Okay? And this is really fundamental to understand what's going on in your application, and also helps us to understand if security has been handled correctly. Because some information must not be passed through the APIs, it must be passed, not in the body of the HTTP request responses and so on. Okay, all these things we will discuss these things later in the course. Okay, we will also test basic usability and user friendliness. Even though the points for this aspect are not so much. We don't have strict requirements on this, but I've seen applications that were almost unusable. Okay, so something reasonable. But we will give you advice how to do a reasonable application in terms of user friendliness and usability. Just use the libraries that we show during the course. Okay, they provide you something, some standard, some basic ways of develop the application, which is more than enough for our course. Okay. Of course, absence of application crashes. Well, that's the minimum, I would say. Okay. Okay, and the rest we already told you. I already told you. Just some final words about AI. We cannot. We need to speak about AI at a certain point. Maybe the course will have to change in the future. But for the moment, okay. The easiest suggestion to give is don't use it. But I know it's a bit limiting, right? So maybe you can try to use it during the labs. Okay, you come to the labs, you use it, you try to solve the labs, and you see how it works. So in the end, you become a little bit familiar with these AI tools by yourself, and we can evaluate together the solutions, what has been created by these AI tools. Okay, in terms of advantages and disadvantages, trade-offs, and so on. Okay, that is, I guess, a really good way of using these AI tools. And maybe for the exam, just not to have any problems, try not to use it. Okay, maybe you can ask for advice. Okay, general advice, like open ChatGPT and say, how should I solve this assignment? Maybe, just for starting. Okay, but not for writing code, because writing code is, in my opinion, a little bit risky, because if the AI tools insert something that you don't really care about and you don't know, you risk to fail the exam. Okay, so I know. The suggestions is a bit generic, but you need to balance the convenience of using the AI tools and the risk of the fact that the AI tool suggests something that then you are not able to explain. It's sort of, you need to create a project in which you are very, very sure that you are able to explain anything you did. Okay? And so the safest way to do it is you do it everything by yourself. By the way, we are not asking you to work 3 weeks full time from scratch. Okay? We will develop the project during the labs and we will publish solutions. So at the end of the course you have a solution for a project which is reasonably simple in the lab. And we will have another developed during the lectures. Okay? Then there will be the project for the exam. It will be a little bit more complicated. Okay? I remind you that 8 credits in this course means 80 hours, okay, in which we can interact together, plus, what's the number? I think 120 of self-work, okay? You work by yourself, okay? So in this 120, there is some activity that you can do at home to study, to develop things for the lab, to understand the things that we explain during the lectures and so on, plus the part that you need to develop for the exam, okay? Okay, so it's perfectly normal to start from your own lab solutions or the published solution to develop the project for the exam, okay? No problem, okay? Also, and then we are almost over here, there are some suggestions already published on the website, sort of facts, frequently asked questions, but they are not frequent questions, but frequent errors, okay, mistakes, if you like. There is also a quick checklist. I think I didn't put the link directly here. Yeah, it's here, okay, in the exam section, okay? That's, let's say, a set of errors that I've seen during the past years in this course, me and my colleagues. So, I mean, not just from this course. We had this course before the cybersecurity course of study was implemented here at the Politecnico, so it's quite a number of years of experience. And so maybe it's worth having a look at this document before you start working on your project. Maybe at middle time during this course when you already know quite a number of things on server side, client side, and so on. And maybe we already introduced a little bit of React. Okay? So you can have a look at what are the most frequent errors and especially how to avoid them. Okay? There are big errors that lead to exam failure, so maybe it's better to read at least the colored parts. Okay? And for the rest, I mean, there are suggestions that helps you to improve your grade. And of course, if you have any questions, since we are in presence and it's not just a remote course and so on, just feel free to ask me, write a question on Telegram, so we use this Telegram channel and so on, okay? So if you have questions, just ask, okay? I think just a few slides for the resources. There's plenty of stuff for programming web applications in the web, okay? Freely available. Just try to focus on quality sources, like official documentation and so on, okay? Not just the advice of some random people somewhere in the internet, okay? There are also books and so on, okay? So if you don't know where to start, at least you have some pointers about where to start, okay? So I would have a break, 10 minutes break now. If you have any questions, comments, feedback for this first part, just come to here to the desk and I will listen to you and maybe we can talk about this in the second part of the lecture. Questions? No questions? Oh, yes. Shh, that's a question. Yes. Shh. Yes. But hopefully they will not happen.
Okay, now about the formal part, we have discussed the code server. Will be asked everything in every line of code, or will be included in some functions, etc. We do something, some parts of the code.
No, I mean, we don't have time to go through all the code, but let's say we are especially good in finding the most problematic parts in the code. Okay, so we will focus on those parts. Okay.
And the other question was about the scheduling.
Then?
Scheduling. After we got the actual sheet of dates, do we have a bracket division of groups of students that should present as late?
I mean, no, I mean, everybody will have a time, date and time. Okay. Yes. But we will arrange this in a suitable manner, hopefully, for all the students.
I was imagining the waiting time of 3 days in the class.
No. There's a date and a time for each one of you. Not to waste time. I mean, time is a precious resource, we know. Okay? Thank you. We'll discuss again this after.